He felt the weight of her life collapse into his arms while his own future slipped through his fingers. The interview that could have changed everything was only minutes away, his phone buzzing with reminders in his pocket, but none of it mattered when he saw the female officer crumple against the cold pavement, blood tracing a thin line down her temple, her breath shallow, her eyes struggling to stay open. In that instant, the world narrowed to one truth. Someone needed him more than he needed success. Before the story pulls you deeper, if you believe in kindness, second chances, and humanity above all else, please like, comment, share, and subscribe to the channel. Grandma Dearie, your support helps stories like this reach hearts that need them. He had rehearsed his answers for weeks. Every night after exhausting shifts at the warehouse, he stood in front of a cracked mirror in his small apartment, practicing confidence he didn't yet feel. This interview was his last hope after months of rejection letters and polite emails that said, "We went with another candidate." His suit was borrowed, slightly tight at the shoulders, the shoes second-hand but polished until they shone. He was finally walking toward the glass-fronted building where opportunity waited, finally daring to believe that maybe life was about to turn in his favor. Then he heard the sound, not loud, not dramatic, just a dull, human thud followed by gasps. He turned instinctively and saw the officer on the ground, her patrol car door still open, her colleagues frozen in shock for a heartbeat too long. People gathered, phones lifted, uncertain, hesitant, afraid to get involved. He didn't hesitate. He dropped his folder, the carefully printed resume pages scattering across the sidewalk like fragile dreams, and knelt beside her. Her face was pale, her uniform smeared with dirt and blood, and the pain in her eyes was the kind that made his chest tighten. He spoke softly, steadying his voice the way he used to when his younger sister had panic attacks, reminding her to breathe, telling her she wasn't alone. His hands trembled as he pressed his jacket against the wound, knowing every second mattered. Somewhere in the distance, sirens began to rise, but it felt like an eternity before they grew louder. People watched. Some filmed. Some whispered. Few helped. He stayed. By the time the ambulance arrived, his phone had stopped buzzing. The interview time had passed. The receptionist inside that building would mark him as another no-show, another unreliable applicant, another closed door. When paramedics lifted the officer onto the stretcher, one of them thanked him with a tired nod, and that was all. No applause. No recognition. Just the quiet reality that he had chosen someone else's life over his own chance. As the ambulance doors closed, he stood there alone, his heart heavy, his dreams feeling smaller than ever, and wondered if doing the right thing always had to hurt so much. The days that followed were brutal. The company never called back. The landlord slid a final notice under his door. His sister, who depended on him after their parents passed, tried to be strong, but he saw the fear in her eyes when she thought he wasn't looking. Doubt crept in during the long nights when sleep wouldn't come. He questioned himself over and over. Was he foolish for caring? Did kindness really matter in a world that rewarded only speed and self-interest? He scrolled through social media and saw the video someone had posted of the incident. It had gone viral, but his face was blurred, his story untold. People argued in comments, praised the officer, debated policies, moved on. No one knew what it had cost him. Weeks later, when hope had worn thin and resignation had settled in, he received a call from an unfamiliar number. He almost didn't answer. The voice on the other end was calm, professional, but carried a warmth that surprised him. It was the department. Officer had woken up after surgery and had one persistent question: who was the man who saved me? She remembered his voice, the way he kept her conscious, the way he refused to leave. She wanted to meet him. He agreed reluctantly, unsure what good could come from reopening a moment that had already taken so much from him. The hospital room was bright with afternoon light when he walked in, hands shoved deep into his pockets, heart racing. She looked different without the uniform, softer, more human, but her eyes were the same, determined, searching, grateful. The moment she saw him, emotion overtook the room. She tried to sit up too quickly, wincing, and he instinctively moved forward to steady her, the same way he had on the pavement. There were no dramatic speeches, no cinematic confessions, just a raw, overwhelming gratitude that filled the space between them. She told him that doctors said she might not have survived if he had waited for someone else to act. She told him that bravery wasn't always wearing a badge, sometimes it was wearing a borrowed suit and choosing compassion anyway. What happened next truly shocked everyone. The department publicly recognized his actions. Local news picked up the story, this time with his face clear, his sacrifice explained, his missed interview acknowledged. People who had once scrolled past now paused, shared, and cared. The company where he had applied saw the coverage. The hiring manager reached out personally, admitting that they had already filled the position but had created a new role just for him, impressed not by a resume, but by character. Donations poured in to help him and his sister. Strangers sent letters. Neighbors who had never spoken before knocked on his door with food, with offers of help, with simple words of encouragement that restored his faith in humanity piece by piece. But the most profound change wasn't external. It was inside him. He no longer saw himself as just someone struggling to get by.